Panthers get shut out in Vancouver for the second straight season.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, December 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. No underscore there. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the Florida Panthers go into Vancouver and get shut out once again by the exact same score of 4-0, except this one was not in the first 30-odd minutes like last year, and it was for the Panthers the second game of this long Western Canadian trip. And for the Vancouver Canucks, they really got a boost in this one with the return of JT Miller to the lineup after missing the last 10 games due to personal reasons. And after the Florida Panthers gave up the first goal to just over 2 minutes and 23 seconds into the hockey game, the Panthers were playing catch up from there, but did not make life difficult for Kevin Lankinen, as Kevin Lankinen continues to be the Panther killer that he is. And here to break down this 4-0 loss for the Florida Panthers against the Vancouver Canucks is Nich Fairbanks on another edition of Fairbanks Friday. So, Nick, welcome to the show. And the Panthers, every Western Canadian trip, you're going to have one of these where the Panthers are just, it'll be over before it starts sometimes.
Definitely it will be. And, as a player, you don't want to blame the time change as part of it. I mean, look, they played the Edmonton Oilers in a 7-game series. So it's not like they had an excuse for that. And it was the longest travel. So, I think just from the start, Vancouver has the pedigree. They play very similar to what the Panthers do. The only difference between them is that I believe Vancouver has more speed. And that was justified with the return of JT Miller last night. You just really saw how that team kind of galvanizes kind of around him and what he brings. So not surprising, unfortunately, but again, as you said, you're going to have one of these games on one of these trips. And you know what? I'm glad that it's out of here early in the trip.
Yeah, and I'm gonna admit I had there was a little bit of shivers down my spine whenever I heard the crowd just chanting JT Miller right off the jump, and then after they went up 3-0 for them, and Vancouver is one of those teams who are maybe trying to knock on the door in the Western Conference. If they defeated the Edmonton Oilers in that second round series, a lot of us would have thought that they probably would have made the Stanley Cup final for them. Thatcher Demko came back, even though he didn't start in net for the Vancouver Canucks. So they're starting to get a little bit healthy again as they're starting to figure themselves out. But really, for the Panthers, you talked about speed for the Vancouver Canucks, and really for the Panthers, when they're out of their structure, we see what happens when they can get burned on their odd man rushes against. And for the Vancouver Canucks, it was like that, like I mentioned in the first 2 minutes and 23 seconds for the Canucks. The Panthers, after the goal against, they went a 10 minutes and 40 seconds without generating a single shot on goal. But here's the thing. Possession numbers were great. The shots on goal advantage were in the Panthers' favor, especially in the second period. But they didn't get goalied in this one. The Vancouver Canucks kept them to the outside. The passing lanes in the middle where you consistently saw a stick there for the Canucks, and 50-50 battles were the thing for the Panthers. And crazy enough, before I give the floor to you, the last time the Panthers were shut out was against Kevin Lankinen at home against the Nashville Predators in that whiteout game back in March. So thank goodness the Panthers don't have to see Kevin Lankinen again this season unless something happens down the road. So I'll give the floor back to you.
Yeah, and you said it, like They didn't get goalie. I mean, Lankinen has played the Panthers very well, even back to his days back in Chicago, where they didn't have the best team in front of him, but he still put his best effort and kept the games really close. I don't think there's some kind of special recipe or anything, or they don't know how to beat him. There's just some teams that you just come to play against and you just have your better games. So with the Panthers being Stanley Cup champions, you know every team's looking at them as a measuring stick to make sure that, hey, how far are we off, or how can we play to either emulate what they did or to, I guess, do better than what they did. So hats off to Lankinen for continuing his domination of the Panthers, but you know, we'll see in the future what that holds. And as far as, you know, the Panthers and everything, again, it just comes down to speed. Vancouver didn't give them any space. You know, a lot of their passes were contested. The passing lanes were not there, and a lot of the shots were blocked.
Yeah.
You know, this kind of reminds me of the Seattle game in a way where they clogged the middle and there was not a lot of chances or shots getting through. So kind of hard to play like that and always having to rip shots against the boards to try to create something. But I will say the first line looked okay last night. I mean, with their possession, it's just they couldn't really generate anything else other than that.
Yeah, 18 blocks for the Vancouver Canucks, just a little bit more firepower than they have over the Seattle Kraken for sure. I mean, and you see what Quinn Hughes can do, especially when he was getting around Matthew Tkachuk as he tried to go for the forecheck, and then it results in the back of their net off a rush after that when they were exiting the zone and catching the Panthers in a change. But also when it comes to speed, when the Panthers were trying to generate and gain the zone, I mean, the Vancouver Canucks were doing a great job on their back checks, and also the Panthers, the communication was off with when they would try to gain the zone, would drop passes in the neutral zone, trying to freeze the defense, and then sometimes there were times where there was no one there, and then it would disrupt everything for them. And also, not a lot of power play time. The two power plays that the Panthers did have, the first one, they lose a defensive zone draw, and they have a hard time gaining the zone again. And then there's a stick there. They're pinning them to the boards, and then they're getting a quick clear. And then the second one, there was a backdoor feed from Carter Verhaeghe to Sam Reinhart, and by the time that he gets the puck and he gets collected there, and after it's bobbled, the shooting lane is already closed for them there. And I mean that's just really the story of the game. One and dones, and block shots, missing the net, and really for the Panthers. Speed once again for them, and this was one of those where again it goes back to the emotional edge that the Vancouver Canucks had in this one. And for the Panthers, it's just one on the schedule where you know that if all three of your goals are three of the four, are against the rush, and especially when the first two are against the Canucks fourth line, you know that's not going to be your typical Florida Panthers type of night.
No, because the team is usually very defensively structured, or they have a game plan where they're going to make sure that they're pinching and keeping the pressure, you know, best, especially on the forecheck. And when you have a team like Vancouver who has the speed, has the structure now, that can actually either do the same thing or actually beat you with that, it's going to be very hard to play them. So, unfortunately, there's not the result that Florida wanted tonight. You know, I think, you know, the regular season does matter to a point, but you know, let's see if, you know, Vancouver this year can get the goaltending that they should have had last year, and see if they can play that same type of game throughout, you know, April, May, and possibly June. So that's just my thoughts on it, and you know, we'll see what happens. Like I said, you know, they have to get through Edmonton. You know, they have to get through. You know, all those other Western teams that are, you know, vying for, you know, the top spot or, you know, better seating. So
Vegas and LA is hot right now, so that's going to be still a very tough division for them. But hey, they're healthier now, so that'll give them a better chances. Right now, as everything stands, they are the second wild card in the Western Conference right now, with Colorado right behind them. So that Western Conference is just tough for anyone in there. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss our 3 duds of the game, and we are going to discuss the moment where we knew the game was lost. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. And if you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sport, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. Here's why you need to get started today. You can win up to 200 times your money on PrizePicks. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. No need to win. The $50 is guaranteed. PrizePicks also runs weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select player projections are discounted up to 25%. And this week on PrizePicks, I'm looking at Jack Hughes to get more than 4 shots on goal, Artemi Panarin to get more than 1 assist, or even Kirill the Thrill Kaprizov. You could go for there. And it's so simple to make any picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly at PrizePicks. Run your game. Also, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And get ready to take on the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Soon you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show, where the Florida Panthers are coming off a 4-0 shutout loss against the Vancouver Canucks from Rogers Arena in BC. And Nick, let's go right to our 3 duds of the game for the Panthers in this one. Number 3 dud for the Panthers, I'm going to go with Mackie Semiskevich in this one. The only player who had an individual Corsi under 50% for the Panthers. And we spoke about the 2 goals from the fourth line of the Vancouver Canucks, that even though the second line was on the ice for the second goal for them. But really, when you think about the possession and the Panthers and being in the Canuck zone, it was like very deflating for the Panthers to concede early on and playing catch up throughout the most of the night. So that errant pass that led to Tomáš Nosek losing his edge, and then the goal by Carson Soucy off the stick of Aaron Ekblad and then bar down for the Vancouver Canucks. That was one that really for the Panthers really put them behind the 8 ball really early on. And so I'm going to give Mackie Semiskevich that first dud for the Panthers. Number 2, Sam Reinhart did not get a shot until the third period. That top line was buzzing, but really the Vancouver Canucks kept the BC boy at bay. You know he loves playing Vancouver. He loves coming back home. But this was a rare occasion where Sam Reinhart basically didn't really do much in this one for the Panthers, and took a rare minor penalty. After the Panthers were in a bit of a push, a little bit of desperation, then for them getting a tripping call there and sending him to the box, only his 3rd minor of the season. And then number 1, I'm going to go with Nate Schmidt. First goal, didn't get the puck deep enough right before the change. Second one, tried to get to tried to get it to Matthew Tkachuk after he was down low, and then that causes different chain reactions. You had to have Bennett support there, which led the middle of the ice open for that rush for the Canucks there. And then the third one, his momentum. I'm not going to blame this one as much on him, but when Matthew Tkachuk, when Quinn Hughes got around Matthew Tkachuk and JT Miller was coming up the left wing, momentum carried him over. Not in a position to block. Uvis was on a little bit of a turnstile right before the Canucks got it into the open net. But he was on the ice for 3 of those goals against, but one of them really on an errant pass for Nate Schmidt there on the second one. But your 3 duds of the game for this one, Nick.
Yeah, no, you had some great picks. I mean, to be honest, with a game like this, I almost wonder if there's anybody who could be a dud.
Yeah.
My number three is going to be Uvis Balinskis. To say that he had a good maybe first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, and then after that you're kind of wondering where he's at, is very concerning to me.
Mhm.
So I don't
Valid.
know if he's getting too much playing time or he's just not confident in the decisions he's making, but he's making a lot of questionable decisions and is putting the team into bad positions. And it makes you wonder. The Panthers were playing actually okay with Mr. Boquist back in the lineup. So where's he at, and why is he not in the lineup right now? So I'll have to go with Balinskis. Second, I'm actually going to do the entire third line.
Okay.
Um, I have not seen enough from them for the last 2 weeks, to be honest with you. They're not scoring. They're basically just a basic checking line right now. I don't really see them generating a lot. And a lot of what they're doing is losing battles, 50-50 battles, unless you're Losterainen. Losterainen seems like he's the only one that's actually going down deep and trying to win pucks. Lundell's not playing very well. And then depending on who their winger is, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of chemistry. And then my number one, and I know I choose this man a lot, but you can't do this. You either have to block or get out of the way. The first goal is on Aaron Ekblad, and I think that's the second time this season where he's actually tipped a puck into his own net, and it's just, to me, that's basic defense 101. Like, you either position yourself to block or you get out of the way so Bob can make the save, because that to me was a savable goal
Mhm.
if Ekblad was not in the way or didn't tip that. So just the awareness and everything, it needs to be there. So yeah, those are going to be my three.
Yeah. I'm looking at when you mentioned the third line, I just quickly looked up Anton Lundell's game logs. He hasn't. He's been 5 straight games now without he hasn't generated a point, and he's a -2 in
Yep.
the last 5. So definitely a group that has to get going here a little bit now, and as the Panthers continue on this road trip. So really, but great start for the season for them. But now that everyone's back, you want to see more of that balance between everyone in the lineup, top to bottom for them. But hey, it's hard to maintain that obviously with a 82 game season. So hopefully we see that return for the Panthers and that third line. But the moment where we knew the game was lost, it's funny because some might go into the direction after the Panthers were down 3. But I'm gonna go in a little bit of a direction of right before the third period. There's a little bit of a break, a mini breakaway for the Panthers, which the Panthers didn't really generate rush chances themselves going the other way and north-south for them. But there was one where we saw the desperation kick in the third period where the Panthers were pushing, but there was a little bit of that in the second period where Barkov goes on a little bit of a breakaway up the left wing. Nobody's on the side of his forehand, and then he decides to go backhand, and then there's a stick there to block a shot when he has all of the short side open for him and to go. And also Kevin Lankinen, even the broadcast mentioned this, glove save after glove save, which the way where when Barkov had it on his stick, it was on Lankinen's blocker side. So really, I was just thinking, I just put my hands over my head on my head, thinking, man, if there was a time to possibly have some confidence going into the intermission and into the third period down 2 instead of down 3, that psychologically changes a lot of things for the Panthers. No guarantee that they come back, but I mean, when it's a move out of desperation for that, I know we saw the great shootout goal, backhand would be the fake between the legs for him, but man, that was one opportunity where you would, if Barkov had to do that again, he would stay on his forehand. So that is the moment where I thought the game was lost for the Panthers.
So I'm going to go earlier than that, and I will comment on Barkov's shootout goal. It was disgusting, and he made Decord look like he was an Xbox player whose controller just glitched and just stayed in position and couldn't do anything. But I'm going to say it's actually the second goal. The main reason is that first goal, yeah, It sucks. It was a tip and everything, and it shouldn't have happened. But the second goal, Panthers are pushing. They're pushing. They're getting the zone time. They got the possession, but they're just not getting anything in. And then you have a rush the other way, and it's just literally a slap pass right past Bob. And you could just tell from there, like, that was really deflating. Like, the Panthers are being beat at their own game, essentially. And from there, I just don't feel like they really emotionally or, mentally were invested 100% after that. I think they were just like, okay, well, that's how this night's going to go. I mean, we can try, but and they've been doing that lately. Like, they'll fall behind and then they'll come back, in a fury. But I just I think after that second goal, I think the team kind of was like, okay, well, let's move on to Calgary.
Yeah, and then with that second goal, the give and go, you're wondering if you're Nate Schmidt and Uvis Balinskis there, what to do when drawing towards Sasson got his second assist of the game there, and then you're trying to commit to the strong side, and then it's an easy deflection right on the blue paint for them when they crash the net there. So it's just like when you're getting those high percentage shots for them. I mean, it's really tough to come back from emotionally there. I mean, and to make matters worse, I mean, getting a goal 9 seconds into a power play where just Quinn Hughes. I mean, how many great things can we say about him? A native of Florida, Orlando native for him, and just after that for Jake DeBrusk, who we've seen so much for his years in Boston, getting that tip-in goal right on the power play. I mean, it was just everything compiled with the Panthers night on that power play goal for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, it's just okay. It's just pouring more salt into the wound for the Panthers there on the evening. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where the road trip continues for the Florida Panthers as they will take it to Alberta, where they will be meeting with some familiar faces out on Saturday night. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed, and we're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. You can leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preference, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join over 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners to this show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now to support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Third and final segment here on this Friday, December 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Here on a Friday, the Florida Panthers are coming off a 4-0 loss against the Vancouver Canucks, second straight year that they lose in Vancouver by the same exact score of 4-0. And Nick, we speak about these West Coast trips, these long trips. You think about over 500, you'll be satisfied. You'll think about 600 possible points percentage, and it's a successful trip, something along those lines. Yada yada yada. But I mean, this one, when you think about what's ahead for the Panthers and a Stanley Cup Final rematch next Monday against Edmonton, and a team in the Minnesota Wild next Wednesday, who the Panthers can't seem to solve. They're on the West Coast trip that they have currently. It's against two of those three teams, some pretty decent losing streaks against. I mean, lost 4 straight now against Vancouver, currently 3 against the Minnesota Wild there for the Panthers. So, I mean, I'm not saying necessarily that Saturday is a must win for the Panthers against the Calgary Flames, but I mean, this is one where if they don't find a way to get the 2 points, you're looking at the road trip to be a little bit of a dud itself for the Panthers.
Definitely will. My personal thought process into this is, a successful road trip will be 3-2. They did win against Seattle, which they've had problems in the past. They were able to eke out a win. Vancouver was definitely not sure about because of the way that their style is. Now you got a team in Calgary who, they started off really well. It seems like the changes that they made really did help, bringing in former Panther Mr. Lamborghini, kind of has that energy, that, injection into the lineup helps. But now they're regressing back to, what their actual identity or what their team is. And this is the game that I believe the Panthers should win and have to win in order to actually meet those expectations of mine personally, to have a 3-2 road trip. But, it really depends to me who's also going to be in goal for the Panthers. I would probably give Spencer Knight the game in Calgary, and then have Bob have a rematch with the Edmonton Oilers. So, don't want to overlook Calgary at all. I mean, I'm looking forward to the rematch and everything, but, it's another game. It's another game that you should win, but just take care of business, and then you can move on to the bigger games.
Yeah, definitely cannot overlook Calgary because the Panthers have lost 5 straight against the Calgary Flames. The last time they won in Calgary was in 2018. So right before the GM change, a few different coaches, and a lot of questions for the Panthers then on if this core could do it at the time, which that part of that core at the time, one of them has been in Calgary, which Jonathan Huberdeau has maybe had a little bit of a resurgence here this season for him. His shooting percentage is over 21%, leads the Flames in points. So happy for him that he gets he's at least a little bit on his way back to where he was. And also for the Calgary Flames, I mean, another former Panther in Mackenzie Weegar. A lot of people thought that he should have been on Team Canada for the Four Nations, but I mean, defenseman for Canada, I mean, that's a really deep group. But if you're missing out on that one, and you're still considered, that's still a compliment to where Mackenzie Weegar was prior to that. So, but also they have the AHL MVP from last year in Dustin Wolf, a really prized prospect for them. Started 14 games, so it's a little bit of a split timeshare between Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar after they traded Jacob Markstrom to the New Jersey Devils this past offseason, and 909 save percentage for them. So he's in the Calder conversation along with the Macklin Celebrinis, the Matvei Michkovs of the world there. So that there's a little bit of for the Calgary Flames, a little bit of a sense of direction now for them in a way, because they're not in a position to rebuild for them with the long-term contracts of Huberdeau, Kadri, and Weegar. But as far as bridging everything in between, they're still the first team out in the Western Conference as far as the wild card race for them. So, like you said, regress a little bit to the mean right now for them. They are, let's see, their last 10. There are 3-5-2 in their last 10 for them. So, or back to a little bit back to earth for them, but still not in the basement as of right now for them, as the last 2 years they have been there.
So I think this game is probably going to come down to who's going to impose their will and actually grind it out. One thing that does concern me is if you do look at the goaltender stats, and you brought the save percentage up, Calgary has got a 909, and the Panthers, I think, are sub 9. So is the defense going to show up? Are they going to support Knight or Bob, depending on whoever they go with? And are they going to be able to stick to that for 60 minutes? Because if the defense isn't going to help the goalie out, I don't care who's playing in net, you're not going to win a lot of games, or you're going to have to score your way out of it. And this is kind of reminding me of what happened a couple of years ago with the President's winning team, where it didn't matter how many goals they had against. It didn't matter how Bob played, but they could score their way out of their problems. And that's not what you want That's not the type of hockey you want. While it's exciting, it's also very up and down. The emotions of the fan too. Like you get shut out by Vancouver 4-0, and then you're going to come back and you're going to win like a 7-5 high scoring game where it's exciting, but you also have a lot of concerns about what's going on in the back end. So just hope the Panthers again can start early, impose their will, and then be able to dictate the game for a full 60 minutes.
Yeah, and from last year's game, if memory serves correct, that was before their 11-game road winning streak, and it was 1-1 for the most part in this one. The Panthers were dominating the possession, but it was 2 short-handed goals against that it broke the Camels' back for that matchup last year in the Saddle Dome. So the Panthers last year, they played a pretty decent game in Calgary. It's just these little mental errors for the Panthers seem to end up in the back of their net, and we saw it happen on Thursday night in Vancouver, last year in Calgary. So it's just a matter of when the Panthers are when the Panthers are in the neutral zone and the offensive zone, when it comes to puck support for them, knowing where your teammate is so that there's no miscommunications and it doesn't end up in a rush, because we've seen whenever the Panthers have a rush chance against you, you get a little nervous for them. They don't give up a lot of them, thankfully, but again, you can't. We're not expecting the goaltenders to stop them, because it feels like the rare ones, it ends up there for the Panthers. So with the personalities that someone like a Ryan Lomberg can, as we know, which my favorite Ryan Lomberg memory still to this day is that one punch to Keegan Kolesar against the Vegas Golden Knights. And then I asked him after the game if he's ever heard of the manga One Punch Man, and he replied, "Is that about me?" So funniest response I ever heard from Ryan Lomberg there. But we're going to see something similar, that if there's a scrum in the game, we're not going to see Ryan Lomberg go after his former teammates, kind of like what we saw with Radko Gudas the year before when they first faced Anaheim. So interesting to see what happens on the on-ice type of things. But the off-ice, they're going to have probably a nice dinner, a nice little get together, lots of smiles and lots of memories. But also, it could be a little awkward in that room when Ryan Lomberg does return to his teammates, because the fact that Huberdeau, Uyghur were traded right before they won. So I wonder if there's going to be a little bit of that awkward energy there, even if they don't say anything.
Well, maybe you could help me out with this. Did Lomberg receive his ring already, or is he getting it like just before the game?
He's getting it. He's getting it on Friday night.
Yeah, that's going to be a little awkward. I know Huberdeau said it's great to see them win, but it hurts at the same time. I mean, listen, when you put your life and your energy into something and it just doesn't work out, and then you see once you leave that organization or that person is better off, it's kind of, it's a gut check. You have to really, kind of like do a self inventory and then try to move on from that. But you can't say that it didn't hurt at all. I mean, as soon as you leave, your team goes to the Stanley Cup twice. So yeah. Really kind of shows like, hey, maybe I wasn't the right part of the configuration and everything, but maybe I can be a solution to where I'm at right now. But back to Lomberg, I think I think you're going to see exactly what Gudas was. I think you're going to see exactly what Montour was. I mean, you're not really going to be in the middle of it unless, you're going after a Greer, who is a former Flame.
Yeah.
You're going to go against the player. You're going to go after somebody who was not on the team. So it's going to be very interesting to see if there is any players that he goes after or tries to, chum with. But I think the Panthers would be smart. Just, like, hey, just go ahead and run around, but we'll play our game. That's fine.
Yeah. It's like, we know his game. We know who he is. We know so they know that they're not going to fall for those mental games that he's going to try to pull against the opposition. But hey, we will forever love the Lamborghini here in South Florida. But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Armando, thank you as always for having me on. You guys can follow me on X at Prudentious0, and make sure to get your Florida history gear from what's his handle?
At FLA Cats History from Francisco Aporta.
Yes, so make sure you check out his store and pick up some of your gear because it's actually pretty cool. But I hope to be back next week discussing hopefully a big win against Minnesota. Last time they won in Minnesota, I was there in attendance, so I know they can do it. They just have to play their defensive game 100%.
Awesome, Nick. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
See you next week.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.